What's up, everybody? Welcome to DFS by the Numbers. These are my NFL DFS picks for week 1 of the playoffs here. And in this playoff slate, we have a 3-game slate on Saturday. This is the one we're going to be covering today. And then I'll also be getting out a Sunday slate video sometime tomorrow, so check that out as well. But we have the Colts versus the Bills, the Seahawks versus the Rams, and the Buccaneers versus the Washington football team. Should be a really fun slate. Going to be going through my top plays here. Before we get started, if you can leave a like on the video, subscribe if you have not yet, would always appreciate that a ton. Trying to reach that 10,000 subscriber mark would be a huge milestone. And also make sure you guys check out my other content. MMA is coming back within the next couple weeks. NASCAR is coming back next month, so lots of great stuff. Even PGA, I'm doing that as well. So go check that out. Would really appreciate that a bunch. And let's get started here. So I do want to point out the game totals for these 3 games here. The Colts versus the Bills is the biggest by a decent margin here at 51-point game total, where the Bills are going to be 6.5-point favorites, rightfully so. Seahawks Rams being the lowest total on the slate at 42.5-point game total, where the Seahawks are going to be 3-point favorites. And then the Buccaneers versus the Washington football team is going to be a 45-point game total right in the middle there. And the Buccaneers are going to be 8.5-point favorites. So starting with the quarterbacks, if you're doing cash, if you're doing one lineup, it's got to be Josh Allen all day. I mean, tough matchup against the Colts, but it really does not matter with Josh Allen. He's been fantastic this year for most of the year. I know there's like a rough stretch of games, like 3-4 games where he was not looking all that great, but has bounced back ever since then and had a really good week last week. He played like a half against Miami, scored 20.26 DraftKings points before that against New England, 35-40. So he does have that huge upside there. I'm not overly concerned about the matchup. I love the stacking options. We'll talk about a bunch of them. STEFON Diggs, Cole Beasley if he plays, John Brown, Gabriel Davis. Tons of options to stack him with. And on a 3-game slate on Saturday, I think if I'm doing 1 to 3 lineups, I'm putting Josh Allen in all 3 of them. If I'm doing multiple lineups, of course, you can get away from it, but it's really hard to get away from Josh Allen, especially with there being not that many great options on the slate. So Josh Allen, clearly my number 1 option there. My number 2 option is going to be, and this is kind of an ugly play, but he has 5,400 in Phillip Rivers on the other side of the ball. In a 51-point game total in a game that they will be trailing, and I do like that for Rivers, so he should be throwing the ball quite a bit. Decent stacking options, T.Y. Hilton, Nyheim Hines, guys like that. But has not had the best season, averaging only 16.3 DraftKings points, 11 points in Week 17 against Jacksonville, 12 against Pittsburgh, 17 against Houston, 17 against the Raiders there. And you just can't really expect a huge ceiling from Rivers here. I guess the floor is okay. I think they're going to be throwing the ball a ton. Maybe he scores a couple times, but I really question the upside of Rivers. But you do get a really big discount off of Josh Allen. That's about all I could say there. So Phillip Rivers is a decent option. Obviously, if you're doing one lineup, you want to go Josh Allen. If you are doing multiple, I think Phillip Rivers is somebody else you could look to. Going down to probably my 3rd best option is going to be, this is if Jared Goff does not play, I think John Wolford's not a bad option at 4,900 just because of how cheap he is. If you play Wolford, you can pretty much play anybody else you like in the lineup, which is pretty cool there. But in his game against Arizona, which was a decent matchup, he scored only 13.84 DraftKings points. But what I did like is he had 6 rushing attempts for 56 yards, and I did mention that last week that he is more than capable of running the ball here. Maybe he scores a couple times. Did not have a touchdown last week, and if he does play again, maybe he can get a touchdown here against Seattle, whose defense started out really bad earlier in the year, but has been good as of late. But still a pretty solid matchup here against Seattle. Decent stacking options to get Cooper Kupp back this week. So I think John Wolford's not an awful option whatsoever at 4,100. Like I said, if you play John Wolford, you can play pretty much anybody else you like in your lineup, so somebody else to look at there. And then somebody else to get a little bit different. I don't think many people are going to be on Tom Brady or this Tampa Bay offense in general, which I think could be a huge mistake here. This is definitely a tournament option here in Tom Brady. Kind of look at what he's been doing as of late. It's been fantastic. Against Atlanta, 34 DraftKings points. Against Detroit, 32 DraftKings points. Against Atlanta, 26. Against Minnesota, 15. But what you can notice about this past couple games is how easy of a matchup there are. I mean, Atlanta has one of the worst passing defenses in the league. Detroit has one of the worst, if not the worst, defense in the league. So now he goes against a pretty good Washington defense. So something to note there, but he has looked really good, averaging 23.2 DraftKings points on the year, and I do think he'll be lower owned. So I do think a lot of the ownership's going to be going to guys like Josh Allen, guys like Russell Wilson. I think Tom Brady's a fine tournament option if you are doing multiple lineups, because I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to be lower owned than they really should be. So those are the 4 I'm looking at. Other than that, not much interest in anybody else. Like I said, Russell Wilson's going to gain some ownership, but really bad matchup, and he has not been all that great as of late. He's been like really bad as of late, especially for Russell Wilson standards there. So getting into the running backs here, number one option is going to be Jonathan Taylor for me, 7,900. The only thing I worry about here is the game script. So the Colts are going to be 6.5-point underdogs, which I do worry about. If they're going to be coming from behind, throwing the ball more, maybe he does not get as much action, but he can catch the ball as well. 2 targets in week 17, 5 targets in week 15, but if they are coming from behind, they're going to be using a lot of Hines in the passing game. So I don't know how much I'm going to go here. I do think he's going to be very, very high owned, but we can't ignore, how good he's been as of late. 41 DraftKings points in week 17, absolute monster game. 19, 33. He's been out on an absolute roll, but yeah, I don't know. I think he's a fine play, but I just worry about the game script. And if the Bills get up 2 ahead, then they could be passing a lot, which will hurt Jonathan Taylor. But there is some scoring ability here, scoring upside in what is a 51-point game total, so something to note there. But yeah, he is pretty expensive there at 7,900. Going down a little bit, I think Cam Akers is really interesting. Not the best matchup in the world, but he is going to get a lot of volume. And at 5,100, if you're going to get 20-plus touches, I think it's definitely something to note. So last week he did have 21 touches, 25 total touches, 4 targets, 4 receptions, and 21 rushing attempts. And he did have a touchdown as well. But the problem is he had 34 rushing yards on 21 attempts, averaging 1.6 yards per carry. Definitely expect that to come back up here and against Seattle, and I think he's a fine option just because of how cheap he is. You're going to get volume. If you're going to give me 20-plus touches at 5,100, I'll honestly take that all day. So Cam Akers is definitely somebody I'm looking at for a cheap play with a lot of volume, and volume is very important, especially on a 3-game slate like this. Going down a little bit, I think Nyheim Hines is really interesting. I talked about the game script a little bit in the Buffalo game. If Buffalo gets ahead too much, I do think the Colts are going to be throwing the ball a ton, especially in a game that has potential to shoot out here with the 51-point game total. I do expect a lot of passing, and Hines is really used in that passing game a lot. Even last week, 7 targets, 6 receptions against Jacksonville. Against Pittsburgh, 4 targets, 4 receptions. So he's definitely able to catch the ball. Maybe they're scoring upside in a game that's projected to score high. So I think Hines is definitely somebody to look at, and it also could be a nice pivot off of the Jonathan Taylor chalk, because I think Jonathan Taylor is going to be so much higher owned than Nyheim Hines, and Hines is at a nice discount too. Other guy I'm looking at is going to be J.D. McKissic, another game script play here. So the Buccaneers are going to be 8.5-point favorites, which means the Washington football team is going to most likely be coming from behind. And when they are coming from behind, it's not much Gibson that you're going to see. You're going to see a lot of McKissic, and he gets a lot of passes too. I remember there was a stretch of games where he was getting a ton of targets, 15 targets, 14 targets in week 9 and week 10, 10 targets in week 13, 4 in week 14, 10 in week 15. He's getting a ton of targets here, 10 in week 16, 8 targets in week 17 there. If you're going to get like 10 targets at 4,800 in a game they're going to be trailing. And something else I want to note, like the Buccaneers are really, really good versus the run. I don't expect them to be running the ball all that much against them. It wouldn't be smart. So I do expect them to be a lot of passing in that Buccaneers game from the Washington side. So I do think that McKissic could have a lot of usage here at 4,800. Other than that, like not really interested in anybody else. Chris Carson is going to gain some ownership, 5,900. I don't like how much Hyde has been involved as of late. 11 rushing attempts in week 17, 16 in week 16. I think he's fine. I'd just rather, save a little salary and go down and get like a Hines, McKissic, or I'd rather even go up and get a Taylor, or go down and get like an Akers as well. So that's it for the running backs for me. Getting into the wide receivers, and there's a clear option up top that I think everybody's going to go to, including me. He's obviously the best option on the slate. It's going to be STEFON Diggs, 7,700. He's been amazing this year, averaging 21.9 DraftKings points. Had a good game last week in a game that he only played about the first half. 44.5 against New England. He has that upside of having a really, really good game, and not overly concerned about the matchup here against the Colts. I do think that this Bills offense is pretty much matchup proof, especially here. And I like STEFON Diggs a lot. He's going to be the most popular wide receiver on the slate, and for a really good reason. If you're playing 1 to 3 lineups, I'd put him in all 3. If you want to try fading STEFON Diggs, good luck. I mean, it's really hard to see him not having a great game here. Really hard to see the Bills not having a great game here in general. So really like STEFON Diggs. Going down to my next favorite option is going to be Terry McLaurin, 6,300. Like I mentioned, you really don't want to run the ball against this Tampa Bay run defense. And the Tampa Bay passing defense earlier in the year was really good, but has been looking not so great as of late. And I think McLaurin's a really good play just because of the amount of volume he's going to get. 8 targets in Week 17, 12 targets in Week 15, 6. He's going to get a lot of targets here against the passing defense that has been struggling as of late. So I like McLaurin a lot. Has been doing good pretty much all year, 15.6 on average each week, and he's definitely somebody I'm looking at 6,300. Going down a little bit, want to keep attacking this Bills game, and John Brown is a really interesting option. So Cole Beasley is questionable. I don't think he'll play. If he does play, I think he's a really good option, but if not, even if he does play, I think John Brown's a really good option here at 4,700. Had a really good game last week, Week 17, scoring 17.2 DraftKings points, averaging 10.8 DraftKings points on the year. And he will be most likely Josh Allen's number 2 option in this offense that's projected to score very high. 51-point game total. Like I said, I'm not overly concerned about the matchup. And really, really cheap here for John Brown at 4,700. Other than that, I do want to talk about the Tampa Bay wide receiver core. So I think they'll all be pretty low owned. Mike Evans is questionable. If he does not play, I'll even be higher on guys like Chris Godwin and Antonio Brown here. But I really like Evans here. Going up at 7,000, I like Godwin a lot. Even Brown at 6,100, I like them all about the same. If I had to rank them, I'd probably go Godwin 1, Brown 2, and Evans last, just because I'm kind of concerned about that Evans injury. Maybe he is limited a little bit, or maybe even doesn't play. So I do like him because they're going to be low owned, and I do think they have a lot of upside as well. So if you're doing like 1 to 3 lineups, cash, I probably wouldn't go there because there are some clear options. But if you're doing multiple lineups, make sure you get exposure on these Tampa Bay wide receivers, because I do think any 3 of them, or maybe 2 out of 3, can have potential to definitely have a good game here against Washington. Going down a little bit, and I do want to, if you're looking for a run back option for the Colts out of your Buffalo stacks, I'd probably go T.Y. Hilton, if anybody. Other than that, I think Nyheim Hines, believe it or not, is a good run back option in a game they should be trailing. But Hilton has actually been really good. So he started out the year really bad, but as of late, 18.1, 28, 25, 11, 9, 13. He's been really good as of late. Like the past 6-7 weeks has been looking great. Cheap play here, 5,000 in a game that's projected to score high, in a game that they're probably going to throw a lot, in a game they're going to be trailing. I actually think Hilton is a pretty good run back option, and my favorite run back option, it's between him or Hines, honestly. I think Pittman's another guy you can go to, but Hilton is looking like the number 1 guy on Indy at the wide receiver position. And then the last guy I want to touch on for some value here, I think Gabriel Davis is fine, but going down a little bit more, I think Cam Sims is very interesting. He's been playing a lot as of late. 5 targets in Week 17, 9 targets in Week 16, 8 targets in Week 15, and he is 3,900. So hasn't been doing much with those targets, 9.3 DraftKings points, 9.3, 7.6, but still, we got to mention that he's playing a lot. He's getting a lot of targets, and he's 3,900. So I don't hate that whatsoever against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers passing defense that has not looked all that great as of late. Just something to note there as like a cheap wide receiver play. All right, and then getting into the tight end plays, yeah, there's probably just one option. Like this slate is tough for tight ends. It's probably Logan Thomas, or I'll talk about 2 other guys, but Logan Thomas is probably the main one just because of how much volume he gets on a weekly basis, and he's actually been doing great as of late. So he's doing what I expected him to do earlier in the year. He had a really bad start to the year, still getting targets, but not doing much with them. But as of late, 13.4 DraftKings points, 24.8, 10.3, 26.1, 13, 12. He's been doing really, really good. I'm against a Tampa Bay team that's not that great against tight ends. I like it a lot here at 4,900. Should be the highest owned tight end on the slate for a good reason too. He's going to get volume. They're going to be trailing 8.5-point underdogs. They're going to be passing the ball a lot. You do not want to run against this Buccaneers run defense. So I think Logan Thomas is probably my main guy. I'm going to have a lot of Logan Thomas. Other than that, my number 2 option is probably going to be Rob Gronkowski on the other side of the ball. 45-point game total. He's getting a decent amount of targets, 4.2, 7.2, 4.9 DraftKings points. 7 touchdowns on the year, so he does have scoring ability. Decent matchup against Washington. Washington isn't that great against tight ends. I think Rob Gronkowski is the next guy I go to, but if I can, I will go up and get Logan Thomas. And other than that, like, it's so ugly. I guess Dawson Knox is somebody you can look at. Should get a decent amount of volume there. 8 targets last week in week 17 for 4.9 DraftKings points, averaging 6.3 on the year. Just a pump play there, but other than that, like, that's about it. It's probably going to be Logan Thomas in most of my lineups, maybe some Gronk, but those two are probably it. And other than that, there's like nothing else that I'd like. And I will touch on defenses just a second here. There's 2 that stick out to me. Number 1 is going to be the Seahawks, especially if Jared Goff does not play. I think the Seahawks is a really good option, 2,700, pretty cheap here. And the Seahawks defense has actually been looking really solid as of late. So I think Seahawks are fine. And then other than that, I think the Buccaneers against this Washington offense is more than fine here at 3,300. Those are probably 2 I'm looking at. Other than that, don't have much interest there. So that's about it. Broke down this Saturday slate. Really looking forward to it. Lots of great plays on this slate. Make sure you guys check out the Sunday slate video, and then I'll probably add another video later in the week as well. And that's about it. And good luck. Let's win some money on the Saturday slate. Great contest out here. And let's keep it going.